Emmanuel proved, just like CF does every day, that you can change lives. Everybody out there, you can change lives for the better just by believing that you can. Emmanuel had no formula. He was a poor kid. And next thing you know, he's in the Oval Office with the President of the United States.
Welcome to the Reindl Report, a podcast out of San Diego, California that rewrites the definition of mediocrity.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Now I'm insulted.
So join along for the ride as Paul Reindl takes you through the world of sports with insight, interviews, and incredibly bad jokes.
It just seems like the people that are so butthurt about it.
Did you throw a butthurt out there?
Yeah, I said butthurt.
2005 called. They want their turn back.
Yeah, walked right into that one.
Now, here's your host, Paul Reindl.
All right. Welcome back to another edition of the Reindl Report. This one should sound a little bit better, being that I'm in a studio. Back in the studio. This is being recorded the week of September 26th, 2016. I say week of because, like I said, this has now become a weekly podcast instead of just whenever the hell I feel like it kind of podcast. Typically going to come out on Wednesdays unless something goes on, something craziness. Look, sometimes life happens. Sometimes life happens and it's going to get pushed back to Thursday or something like that. But typically, going to come out on Wednesdays on iTunes as well as the ReindlReport.blogspot.com. I am Paul Reindl. I am the host of the Reindl Report. Funny how that works with the name and that whole deal there. But lots to get to on this podcast. In just a few minutes, I will be joined by a good friend of mine and somebody that I've really gotten to know a little bit and really just come to respect, just the kind of person that they are, but also the kind of work that they do and all the accomplishments that they have gained over the span of their life. Just an incredible story. And that is Bob Babbitt. He is in the Ironman Hall of Fame. He's the founder of a co-founder of the Challenged Athletes Foundation that's based here in San Diego, and they impact lives all across the world. I'm not going to get too much into it right now. I'm going to let Bob tell that story, but just an absolutely very interesting guy. And I was really excited to get to sit down with him, and we talked. We just couldn't stop asking him questions. We go for about 40 minutes. So I'm going to be relatively short here in the beginning. I don't have a whole lot to say. Chargers, Aztecs. Okay, I'll touch on that. And we'll get some stories around the NFL, sure. But I need to start on a bit of a somber note. And that is regarding the Jose Fernandez passing over the weekend. If you've been under a rock, yes, that Jose Fernandez, the phenom 24-year-old pitcher for the Miami Marlins, lost his life over the weekend in a tragic boating accident. He wasn't by himself. He was with a few friends. They all passed on as well. And it was a very, very terrible way to wake up. Was it Sunday morning? I checked on Twitter. First thing I saw, somebody retweeted, I don't know, it was MLB or MLB PR, something like that, but it was an all black screen with the words like official statement from the Marlins and just a quote of them saying we are shocked and deeply saddened by this news, something along those lines. And I just go, no way, man. And look, it's always tragic anytime somebody dies. And it's always tragic when somebody dies well before their time. But it seems to sting a little bit more when it's a celebrity or an athlete, somebody that people look up to, whether that's somebody in the media, a young fan, an old fan. It seems to sting a little bit more, doesn't it? And I don't really know why that is. I would just assume it's because we feel like we have some sort of connection to them. Okay, like here's a story for you. Okay, I'll try to keep it short here. Growing up, I grew up in Seattle, and I grew up a baseball fan. So I grew up listening to Mariners baseball, and since 1977 till 2011, 2012, there was a broadcaster by the name of Dave Niehaus, and he called just about every single game. I'm not going to do the math on how many games that was over a span of 35 years, 162 times 35. I'm sure one of you guys are smarter than me, and you'll tweet me the answer or something like that. But I read something that, like, Dave Niehaus, I remember reading, he only missed like 30 games over that entire span. I mean, unbelievable. And I didn't really have a grandpa in my life, okay? I didn't have what at least I used to consider kind of the stereotypical grandpa takes you out fishing, takes his grandson out fishing kind of a story. You know, I didn't have that in my life. And I remember getting the news that Dave Niehaus had passed away, and I felt like I had lost a grandpa. I felt like I had lost a relative, because that was somebody who, for 6 months out of the year, I spent my nights listening to them talk and tell stories and tell a baseball game. And so maybe that's why it seemed to sting so much with Jose Fernandez and his passing this weekend. And that, I'm like choking up thinking about it, because then, so the game gets canceled on Sunday. They were playing, I believe, the Atlanta Braves. MLB cancels that game. Nobody on that team was able to be there and play a silly, meaningless baseball game on a Sunday like that. But the next day, D. Gordon, one of Fernandez's best friends by the reports that I've read, he was leading off in the bottom of the first in Miami after a very touching tribute by the players and by the organization. And he's leading off, and he decides he's going to lead off in the right-handed batter's box. A left-handed batter, he's going to hit in the right-handed box with Jose Fernandez's helmet and a tribute to him. He takes the first pitch by Bartolo Colon. It's a ball one. Then he switches over, gets a new helmet, his helmet, switches over to the left-handed box, sees ball two. And on the third pitch, he hits a home run that he said, and I'm gonna play that for you. He said was the farthest hit ball that he's ever hit. And watching him round the bases, but it was about the time he got to second base when it started to hit him, and you could tell he was becoming overcome by emotion. And when he got to home plate, he looked up to the sky. And after that, he didn't look up again. He couldn't lift his head. He just chin to his chest, bawling his eyes out, completely overcome with emotion. He hugs the next hitter that's coming up to bat. The bat boy pats him on the back, gave him half a hug. The next guy coming out of the dugout gives him a hug. The next guy behind him gives him a hug. And he's just trying to get into the dugout, crying so hard. And finally, I believe it was actually Barry Bonds, the hitting coach for the Marlins. You might have heard of him. He just grabbed D and just held him. And they just cried. There was not a dry eye in the Marlins dugout, and there wasn't a dry eye in the office that I was sitting in, because it was powerful stuff to watch. And it was one of those things that, even though it comes at such a tragedy, at the cost of such a tragic loss, we as sports fans, and we just as people in general, are better people for getting to at least experience that. Here is D. Gordon post-game with one of the Marlins Fox broadcasters, I could have trimmed it up a little bit. It's about 2.5, 3 minutes. I could have trimmed it up, but it wouldn't have done it justice. Here's D. Gordon after a very emotional game, talking about his home run and talking about his friend, the late Jose Fernandez. And just listen to the emotion in D's voice.
D, how did you manage to play this game tonight?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know how any of us got out there and played today.
The emotion before the game, incredibly moving with the other team coming in, the Mets coming in, and there was this emotion that you had to get, and then you got a ball game to go through. But just to talk about that before the game, and did you find some, in a crazy way, some comfort in getting to play a game and kind of release your emotion through this game at all?
First of all, I want to say thank you to the Mets. They're first class, man, for coming in, and showing their gratitude to us and being there for us in the time of need. Baseball is a family, and that was just amazing for them to do, and we didn't expect that, but I'm going to be honest with you, man, no, there was no gratitude going out there to play because that guy would have been on the mound, and if he wasn't on the mound, he would have been on the top step screaming for us. Yeah. So there's definitely no gratitude in that.
So you go up to the plate the first time. What did you have Jose's helmet as well on the right side?
I had a helmet my size with his number on it, and I tried to impersonate his batting stance as close as possible. And I just hope he's happy, and I hope he's good, man, because we loved him. We loved him so much.
D, you hit a home run. You hadn't hit a home run all year. You come up the left side. You hit a home run tonight. Justin Bohr hits his first professional triple ever. Somebody helping you out tonight?
Man, I told the boys, if y'all don't believe in God, y'all might as well start. I ain't never hit a ball that far, even in BP. And for that to happen today and for JB to hit that triple, man, we had some help.
Absolutely crushed this ball. Upper deck, you come home and then you release. All your teammates are with you.
That was one of the best moments in my life. I don't have kids, so that's the best moment of my life to hit a home run for him.
You end up winning the ball game, and then at the end of the game, you get around the mound, and it just, I don't know, I think Jose's proud of you guys. That's all I could say. I know it's the toughest, probably game, one of the toughest days of your life. I'm sure that is.
Yeah, man, very tough, man, but it's only a fraction of how his family feel. We just think it's extended family, and I just pray for them at this time.
Very, very powerful stuff. Like I said, sometimes things happen, and we're not happy that they did happen. We're not happy for the reason that these things happen. But watching D. Gordon hit that home run and seeing the reaction from his teammates and his brothers there on the team, holding him, just embracing him and crying with him, I really believe I'm a better person for getting to see that. So that's all I got on Jose Fernandez. Just a life taken too young. His poor wife, who he announced, by the way, that she was pregnant recently. So his child will not grow up with his father, and it's very sad. I want to move along, and I'm going to move along quickly because I want to get to Bob Babbitt here. San Diego State, if anybody cares, they had a bye week. They moved up in the poll. I think I said it last week. I think I remember saying how San Diego State would it be that the first time in 21 years that they get ranked, it's followed by a bye week, and then they get dropped out of the rankings. Well, they didn't. They actually moved up from 22 to 19 in the AP poll. I believe they were 24th in the coaches poll, and that's about it that I have to say on the Aztecs. It is awesome to continue to see Donnell Pumphrey's name on Heisman watch lists, seeing multiple games over the weekend, and the graphic comes up of the Heisman watch, and sure, you got Lamar Jackson, JT Barrett, guys like that, Christian McCaffrey, and then you see Donnell Pumphrey. So that's just one of those things that I will never get bored of looking at. As an Aztec, and the amount of publicity, or lack thereof, I should say, that the school traditionally gets in its athletics, there's a few things that I'm never going to get sick of. I'm never going to get sick of watching Kawhi Leonard tear it up in the NBA. Not going to get sick of seeing Donnell Pumphrey's name being mentioned as one of the top 5 players in all of college football. So that's all I got on the Aztecs. Over to the Chargers. Oh, boy. So the Chargers, they're a bad football team. The San Diego Chargers in 2016, they're a bad football team. I try to give them the benefit of the doubt after the Jacksonville game, saying that, look, they lost to Kansas City in overtime on the road, but they played 50 pretty quality minutes of football. Well, it turns out Kansas City's not off to a great start. They're off to a sloppy 2-1. But, yeah, San Diego, I mean, they played great football for 50 minutes of that 60-minute game plus overtime, and they lost it there at the end. And we're thinking, okay, well, that's a terrible way to lose a game. But then they come out and mop the floor with Jacksonville. Well, it turns out Jacksonville's also just not a very good team. And then we go on the road, and we see what we get against the Colts, and it just all around sloppy performance. No running game. Phillip Rivers did not have a good game by his standards whatsoever. The defense got shredded on multiple drives. Just Andrew Luck and the Colts, they could do whatever they wanted on offense most of the game. At least most of what I saw. If somebody else saw differently, please let me know. But it's become pretty evident that the Chargers are not a very good football team. And that's just the way that it is. That's the way the cookie crumbles. Another season-ending injury, which is becoming a theme now. We lost Brandon Oliver in the preseason, Keenan Allen week 1, Danny Woodhead week 2, and now Manti Te'o week 3. Who's next? My God, what is going on? I've never seen a team hit by the injury bug this hard, this early. This consecutively. Is that a word, consecutively? I mean, it's blowing me away. Do we need to evaluate the training staff? Are these players not being properly trained up? Or what the hell is the problem here? Because this is getting to the point where it's just ridiculous right now. Phillip Rivers, by his standards, not a good game. He threw for 330 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Just kind of a non-factor, really. He looked like a poor game manager, a game manager, somebody that does just enough to get you the win. He didn't lose the game, but he certainly didn't win the game. It wasn't a good game for him. And I don't think it's anything to worry about. I don't think that's what he normally is by any means. So I don't think, if you're a Chargers fan, if you're a football fan, you know what you're going to get from Phillip Rivers every week. Most weeks, I should say, because sometimes you'll get a performance like that on the road against the Colts. So I kind of dismissed that. Melvin Gordon, 35 yards on 16 carries. That certainly is not going to cut it. Look at the Colts. Andrew Luck. I mean, God, I don't know what to say anymore with Andrew Luck. I said last week, I went off on Andrew Luck, saying that he gets more of a free pass by fans and by the media than any other player that I've ever seen, certainly. And I started it off by clarifying that if I was the Indianapolis Colts, I would have picked him too at number 1. I would have picked him at number 1. But what has he gotten you so far? He turns the ball over a ton. And for half the game or 3/4 of the game, at least this season, he looks terrible. He looks absolutely awful. I tweeted out during the game, I wonder if we're going to get basic cable Andrew Luck or DirecTV Andrew Luck in the fourth quarter. Because it was night and day, the difference between good Andrew Luck and bad Andrew Luck. Good Andrew Luck is really good. But bad Andrew Luck, very, very, very bad. Not a good quarterback. Really, he pretty much had very similar numbers. He had 331 yards, very similar to Rivers. About one more yard, but he had one touchdown and then one interception to go. Look, it was just a bad game all around by the Chargers. Hit with the injury bug once again. I really don't have a whole lot more to say. I don't know what else there is to say, quite frankly, besides they sucked. And Mike McCoy's seat has got to be getting very, very warm. Looking ahead, they're bringing in, it's going to be a bad football game on Sunday. I'll tell you right now, it will not be aesthetically pleasing to the eye. We got the Chargers and the Saints. Drew Brees coming to town for the first time in his career since he left the Chargers. Saints are 0-3, got absolutely destroyed by the Falcons in New Orleans on Monday Night Football in Week 3. And the Chargers, obviously, a sloppy 1-2. I don't know, man. I would probably take the over in that game. I think it's going to be a high-scoring shootout, and I'm not going to predict that game. I'm not going to give a score or anything like that. It's going to be some sloppy football, and that's all I got to say about that. So, something new that we did just last week. I got a 60-second timer here, and I'm going to just blow through as many topics in the NFL's week that was, which was now week 3 as we head into week 4, and just see how many topics I can get to. Might come back and touch on them at the end. I thought it sounded pretty cool last time. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. We did not come up with a name. Nobody, obviously my listenership was subpar last week because nobody else came up with an idea either. I called for an idea, didn't get any. So I don't know. Maybe we'll just call it like 60 seconds with Paul, because that's all you need, right? That was a dirty joke, and I believe I even said last week, "Come on, guys, let's keep it clean. No inappropriate jokes." And then I come up with that. So on that note, here it is. Let's see what I can talk about from the NFL's Week 3. Here we go. All right, Patriots 27-0 over the Texans. Bill Belichick, you are the GOAT. No questions asked in my mind. Jacoby Brissett? What? Doesn't matter. Okay, Bills and Cardinals. Bills destroy the Cardinals 33-18. Really, Arizona? Really? 1-2? I picked you to go to the Super Bowl. You're making my NFC Championship prediction look absolutely terrible. Broncos off to a 3-0 start. Not bad, Trevor Siemian. Not bad. Chargers, Colts, just talked about it. This is why we can't have nice things in San Diego. Vikings 22-10 over the Panthers. Minnesota, you officially have my interest as a Super Bowl threat. And then the Eagles and the Steelers. Eagles 34-3 over the Steelers. Carson Wentz. Can anyone name me a better start to the season for a rookie quarterback? 3-0, and he's torching everybody. And there it is. 60 seconds with Paul, because that's all I need. But seriously, like right there at the end, I was talking about Carson Wentz as the Steelers just get steamrolled by the Eagles, who are 3-0 now this year. I mean, Carson Wentz, can somebody think maybe I'm drawing a blank? I didn't look into it, but can somebody name me a better start to the season for a rookie quarterback? The guy looks unbelievable this season. Just absolutely picked apart Pittsburgh. And like I said about the Cardinals, who I picked to go to the Super Bowl from the NFC, I picked the Steelers to go from the AFC, and they looked sloppy. Both teams looked really bad. Now, I know it's 1/16 of the season. There's 13 more games to go. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. I'm dead serious when I talk about the Vikings now. This was a team that had serious Super Bowl aspirations before their young star quarterback Teddy Bridgewater went down. Well, now they got Sam Bradford, and they are looking like a very scary football team. Very interested to see what happens there with the Minnesota Vikings. All right, that is it. on the football and the sad baseball news and the not a whole lot of college football news. Going to switch things up here. Like I said earlier, Bob Babbitt, host of Babbittville Radio in the Ironman Hall of Fame and co-founder of the Challenged Athletes Foundation, something that you probably haven't heard about yet, but you're going to want to hear about CAF. You're going to want to hear Bob's story, how he got to where he is at. I call him the most interesting man in San Diego. You know, the gray beard, the Dos Equis commercials, the most interesting guy in the world. Bob Babbitt might be the most interesting guy in San Diego. He joins me next, and we talk for a good amount of time here as we proceed here on the Reiner Report. All right, I don't want to waste any more time because I am sitting here with somebody that I call the most interesting man in San Diego, Bob Babbitt. Bob, are you familiar with the Dos Equis commercials, the most interesting guy in the world? I think you're the most interesting guy in San Diego.
Well, thanks, Paul. Appreciate that, man. It's a great place to be, and obviously just everything we've done with running and triathlon and cycling. This is the endurance sports capital of the world, and I'm proud to be the mayor.
There we go. So, yeah, I talked about it earlier in the last segment there. So, Bob Babbitt on Twitter at Bob_Babbitt, Babbitt. So, Bob, you started the Challenged Athletes Foundation, something that has really become a big part of my life, something that I look forward to working with and hearing about the stories. You're in the Ironman Hall of Fame. You host your own radio show on Sunday nights here in San Diego. What else do you do? I mean, don't be afraid to pump yourself up here. You have full permission. Give the listeners a little bit about your history and how you got to where you're at right now.
Well, actually, everything started really with the Ironman Triathlon because back in 1978, moved out here to San Diego, was a school teacher or a PE teacher back east, and came out here to work at a small private school called Children's School right here in Sorrento Valley, by the way. And I read in 1979 about this thing called the Ironman Triathlon. And it was an article in Sports Illustrated, and only 15 people were on the starting line, and 12 people finished. And when I read that article, along with my roommate, a guy by the name of Ned Overend, and Ned went on to become a world mountain bike champion. But to show you how old this is and how far back we go, mountain bikes hadn't been invented yet. So he was a mechanic at San Diego Suzuki. So we read about this thing called the Ironman, decided we wanted to do it. So it's not like you can go online and sign up. We had to track down people and make phone calls. And so we went to a police auction to get bicycles. We didn't own bicycles. And mine was $75. The whole back end had been burnt in a fire.
Oh, my goodness.
And had a Radio Shack radio mounted on the handlebars, a solid rubber tires because I didn't know how to change my tires. And had a fuzzy raccoon seat cover and had panniers, sleeping bag, and a tent on the bike because I thought that the Ironman was 2.4 miles of swimming. Then you rode 56 miles and camped out and rode back the next day and ran the marathon. I had no idea you're supposed to do the whole thing in one day. So Ned and I trained for this thing, and I remember us both riding out through Mission Valley. And it was so hot, and we were rock climbers, so we had helmets with no holes in them. And we were like, there's no way we can do 112 miles. Our heads are just going to explode. It took us a while to realize that people had helmets with holes in them or didn't wear helmets. We didn't wear helmets at all. So we get to this race called the Ironman, and you had your own support crew. And during the race, I finished the swim and came out of the water, which surprised the heck out of me. And 25 miles into the bike ride, I see my crew standing on the side of the road while I'm tuning my radio in, and they hand me a Big Mac fries and a Coke. In mile 80, I got a root beer snow cone. At the end of the bike ride, my crew was waiting for me with a bamboo mat and said, how about a massage? So as I was listening to music, I got a 45-minute massage between the bike and the run. And they had a rule back then. If you lost 5% of your body weight during the race, they pulled you out of the race. So I was eating Hawaiian sweetbread, and I was drinking Gatorade because we didn't know what the heck we should be doing for nutrition. And I get on the scale at the end of the bike ride, And then about 5 miles later, I get on the scale again, and I can hear the guy in the walkie-talkie going, "Can you give me that again? He's gained 4 pounds. You can't gain weight doing this."
The first man in history to gain weight.
Exactly. So then, and meanwhile, 1979, I told you, there was 15 starters and 12 finishers. Because of the article in Sports Illustrated, now it was 108 of us at the starting line. So the event had gotten huge. So as I'm running up Diamond Head, realizing I'm going to finish this thing all in one day, my crew is behind me in their Fiat convertible with their headlights on, and I'm running up Diamond Head and down in the Capilani Park. And as I'm coming down the hill, I start thinking, this is so cool. I'm finishing this one day. There's going to be, there's going to be bands out there. There's going to be all sorts of stuff at the finish line. And I come along, and there's a chalk line across the road, and there's a light bulb hanging above my head. And I hear a voice in the darkness to the right go like, "Hey, you." I'm like, "Yeah." "You in the race?" "Yeah." "You're done." And that was it. There was nobody there. There was one idiot doing one-arm push-ups in the park. But when I finished that race, it sort of taught me, it gave me this business card that told me that I could accomplish anything in my life. And even things that I thought I could never do. I surprised me. And when I came home and started talking about this triathlon thing and how big everything, because remember, triathlon was born here in 1974, I kept working at the children's school, running a PE program. But at the same time, I started writing for a magazine, first called San Diego Track Club News. And then I think I was persistent enough, it became San Diego Running and Triathlon News, and became the L.A. editor, and would drive back and forth to L.A. with the former art teacher at my school who became the photographer. And we kind of started covering this crazy sport, and we loved it. So what happened was in left teaching, and then this Running and Triathlon News went out of business in April of 87. And my partner Lois and I didn't know what we were going to do. We're out of a job. Our business is gone. Or not business, the magazine we worked for was gone. So I went around and met with two other free publications. The one was called Southwest Cycling, one was called California Bicyclist, and they just covered cycling. And I told both of them, if we came up with a magazine that covered running, triathlon, and cycling, that would be really popular because all these sports are growing. And both publishers told me the same thing. We will never cover running because we're not going to put a skinny guy on the cover of our magazine. And triathlon's a fad that's going to be gone in 5 years. Now, this is 87. So we came home, and some friends gave us $17,000 and said, go start your own magazine. So we did. Competitor Magazine came out in June of 87. We were underneath 20,000 pounds of bike racks. We were in 200 square feet. We were paying $200 a month, and I was living on friends' floors. We didn't pay ourselves for a year and a half. But we believed in what we were doing, and we never questioned, oh, my God, are we going to go out of business? We didn't know. Ignorance is bliss. We started this publication, and eventually we grew it to 11 publications called Competitor in 11 different regions around the country, 500,000 circulation. And at the same time, we built up an event series called Muddy Buddy that was the predecessor of Tough Mudder and Spartan Race and Warrior Dash. Grew that from one event to 7 events in 7 markets around the country. And at the same time, started Competitor Radio back in 1990 here at what is now the mighty 1090, and have been on every Sunday night between 8 and 10 since 1990. And my whole mentality when starting the radio show was nobody knew who our athletes were. So my thought was I wanted people to hear a radio conversation with Magic Johnson and Wayne Gretzky and people like that, and then hear Dave Scott, Mark Allen, and Pauline B. Frazier and realize maybe they're important too. Mm-hmm. And that really helped grow not just my business, but also the awareness, especially in Southern California, of what we were doing and who our athletes were. And eventually that became, who knew that you could listen to my show outside of Southern California and it wasn't Sunday night between 8 and 10. The fact that then they had podcasting and my show could be heard anywhere in the world at any time, that was mind-boggling for me.
Sure.
And
Wow.
what that led to was while we were doing Competitor Magazine, a friend of ours, a guy I didn't know when he first was injured, a guy named Jim McLaren in 1985, was an actor, was a football player from Yale, weighed 300 pounds, living in New York City, taking acting classes, was on his motorcycle, and he got hit by a New York bus. He was thrown 90 feet in the air, dead on arrival. He lived but lost his lower leg. So he came back from that, and that's when I met him. He became a triathlete and went 10:42 at the Ironman World Championship, which is amazing. He ran a 3:16 marathon, which is unbelievable, with a prosthetic leg, which would be considered prehistoric by today's standards. So I met Jimmy and was covering him as he became this well-known international star as an amputee athlete. He was very recognizable. Well, flash ahead 8 years, and 1993, he was racing in Mission Viejo, and a van goes through a closed intersection, hits the back of his bike, propels him into a pole head first. A guy who's already an amputee becomes a quadriplegic.
Oh, my God.
At that point, myself, Jeffrey Esikow, and Rick Kozlowski, we got together and decided we need to do something for Jimmy. The only thing we knew was triathlon. So we decided we would do this triathlon for Jimmy and try to raise $25,000 to buy him a vehicle he could drive with his hands. And then hopefully that would give him the independence he needed to he'd be able to do things on his own. From covering paralyzed athletes, what I heard from people all the time was the worst part about being paralyzed is here come mom and dad back in my life. I'm 30 years old and no sense of self or independence. So our goal was raise 25 by Jimmy Avan. We raised 49 and we thought our job was done, but 3 amputee women came up to us and told us Jimmy was their hero. Jimmy was the reason they got into endurance sports. And did we know that your insurance will cover a walking around leg or an everyday chair, but anything to do with sport is considered a luxury item and not covered. So that's when we decided to get our 501(c), start the Challenged Athletes Foundation, and since then we've sent out over 13,000 grants, totaling, we've raised now $75 million. Recently we sent out 2,098 grants totaling $3.7 million. And it's been amazing. I just got back from the Paralympics in Rio, and 44% of the U.S. team was supported by the Challenged Athletes Foundation, and 66% of the medal winners had been supported by Challenged Athletes Foundation.
Well, Bob, I need to have you on every week because then I don't have to do a podcast. You just answered every question I could have possibly asked in about 10 minutes. I do want to get to the Challenged Athletes, but first I want to backtrack a little bit to the Ironman because I only know maybe 2 people that have competed in an Ironman.
Yeah.
A lot of questions.
Sure.
Because I think it is just I can't even fathom going through the training and the actual race itself. I think maybe I could do the bike race, maybe the bike portion.
Yeah.
I'm not a strong swimmer. There's no way I'm running 26 miles.
Which means you've got our skill set. Because what I tell people all the time when they think Ironman, they think triathlon, they think uber athlete. I can't do this. This is beyond me. And what I tell them all the time is if you wore arm floaties as a kid, if you had a paper route and you played capture the flag, you have our skill set, right? Swim, bike, run. And if you do a little bit of that on a fairly regular basis, you will become a triathlete. You don't have to be 6'8". You don't have to weigh 350 pounds. You don't have to have any hand-eye coordination whatsoever to become a triathlete. And then the Ironman part of it is just something, it's something a little further down the line.
Right.
But it's one of those things that will change your life. Just the training, the family involvement, the coming across that finish line, accomplishing something you never thought you could accomplish. It's cathartic. It does change people's life. And that's what attracted me to it because I saw how it changed my life. And I've seen, Rudy Garcia Tolson's double above knee amputee. And here's a kid who was told he would never run, right? He'd be on a walker his whole life. He went 16:05 at Ironman, Arizona, right? Sarah Reinertsen, single above knee amputee. She became the first single above knee amputee to finish the Ironman. So all these, what I love is storytelling. That's sort of what I think I'm halfway decent at. And the athletes in the Ironman, there's 2,000 people in Kona. Every one of them has a story. And every one of them has a story that will resonate with people listening on the radio. And now that event that had 15 starters and 12 finishers and then eventually 108 starters, well, now there's 45 full Ironmans around the world. There's 95 of what we call Ironman 70.3, which is half Ironman events. The brand, the Ironman brand with all those events sold for $900 million to the largest landowner in China called Wanda. So what started as sort of this freakish little teeny sport has become something gigantic. And when you add that to Rock and Roll Marathon and then the Spartan Race and Tough Mudder, millions of people are doing those. our world has changed significantly. We've got this endurance entertainment marketplace that, it moves needles. Every city wants these events because they fill hotel rooms, right? Heads in beds is what cities are all about. And our events, which used to be considered a burden because we're blocking off the roads and impacting people trying to get to work or church, now they realize we want these events because they change the dynamics of our city. The message is get fit. The message is these are high-end AAA people who spend money. You want them coming to your city. They're not ripping up your city. They're coming there to bring their family and stay at Four Seasons. So it's a good demographic, and people have realized that.
Talking with Bob Babbitt here on the Reindl Report. Bob, you are in the Hall of Fame with the Ironman there. You started CAF. A couple quick things left on the Ironman, and then I want to get to CAF.
Sure.
There's so much I could talk about the Challenge Athletes Foundation. First of all, how did you get into the Hall of Fame? It wasn't really because you became the first person gaining weight. How are you in the Ironman Hall of Fame? How did that come about?
Well, I think because I believed in the brand early on, and I was one of the storytellers for the brand, and over in starting the radio show and showcasing the brand, writing. I did the 25 Years of Ironman coffee table book. I wrote a book on Mark Allen. I wrote a book on Ken Souza. Wrote a book on a woman named Judy Molnar called You Don't Have to Be Thin to Win, where she lost 180 pounds and did the Ironman. So over the years, and then obviously, Competitor Magazine, developing that product in the 500,000 circulation, showcasing the Ironman, showcasing the sport of triathlon. I think it's probably more for my contributions from that side. It certainly has nothing to do with athletic ability.
Okay, well then my last bit on that note.
Yes.
For the Ironman, what is the most difficult part of training for an Ironman? Because obviously there's the swim, there's the bike, there's the running, but I've been told it's the mental part.
Yeah. How
would you define, what would you say to encourage somebody to run, maybe not the Ironman down
but to
in
do
Kona,
a triathlon?
But a triathlon that
Yep.
says, I could not do that. What's the toughest part of, is it physically just getting out of the house for the first couple of weeks and getting into a rhythm?
It really is. The deal is for letting people know, one, by doing any triathlon, it will alter your opinion of you, right? And it will sort of force you to eat a little better because, as you're climbing on the bike, you're going, you know what? If I was down 10 pounds, I would climb better. If I was down 10 pounds, I would run better. The thing with triathlon, it's the dedication. It's saying, I'm going to do a little swimming, cycling, and running. But I think people get carried away and train way too much. I did a half Ironman on Sunday. What's today? Tuesday. Yes, 2 days ago I did a half Ironman. And my longest bike ride in the last couple of weeks has been 18 miles. I haven't run a step in 2 weeks. And I play in the ocean for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. I think the key is that you get yourself into some sort of fitness, and then you do a little swimming, a little cycling, a little running. You don't need to do those distances to go those distances. You just have to be fairly mentally tough, and you deal with the fact that what I love, it's sort of a microcosm of life. So when I'm out there doing this race, one, nobody's getting a hold of me on a cell phone. Nobody's texting me. I am with myself. How often can you say I spent on Sunday 6 hours and 5 minutes with me and, a couple thousand of my closest friends. And so while you're out there, all you're doing is you're staying in the moment. I kept thinking that Dave Scott would say, rather than going, God, the left leg, my quad feels this or my hamstring feels that, is you stay in a moment. Stay in right now, this step, this pedal stroke. And it helps you in everything else you do, because it's so easy to look at your desk at work and go, where do I start? I'm sure for you, Paul, you're looking at, oh my God, I've got the Padres, I've got all these things I got to prepare. And that can sort of be paralyzing. But when you go, I'm starting with this, and then I'm doing this, and then I'm doing that. So I'm staying in the moment. I'm doing what I need to do right now. I'm thinking, I got to get a gel in. I've got to take a little salt. I've got to drink. So it's almost like you're a car where you're monitoring all the instruments throughout the day and deciding, I'm getting a little low on gas here, I better fuel up. I'm getting a little warm, I better put some ice on my head. It takes you down to the barest essentials of point A to point B as quickly as you can, as safely as you can. That's what triathlon's all about. And that's why it is something, when people think they can't do it, anybody can do a triathlon. It's just a matter of saying, I'm going to get out the door and try.
I love that. It's just we've been on almost 20 minutes already just on the Ironman, and it's just so fascinating to me because that's just not something that I talk about very often. It's not a sport that gets a whole lot of national publicity, mainstream publicity, especially here in the radio studio that we're at. It's Chargers, Padres, Aztecs, but Chargers.
Right.
And it's just, there's so much that goes into it. Like you said, the mental aspect of it and the stories that can be told. And like you said, every single person that runs an Ironman has a story.
Yes, they do.
And that's incredible to me.
Yeah.
Bob, we're talking with Bob Babbitt here on Twitter at Bob_Babbitt. Talk to me about the CAF, Challenge Athletes Foundation. It's an organization that really how I've got in touch with you, and I've gotten to work with them a little bit over the last year or so.
A lot. You guys have done an amazing promotion for CAF.
Absolutely. We try. The athletes, they do a lot more for me and Kevin than we do for them. I can promise you that.
Yeah.
It is always the highlight of not just that show, the entire week's worth of shows, hearing just some of the most incredible stories I've ever heard. And this is the challenged athletes, so physically disabled athletes would be, how would you describe it?
Basically,
talk to me about the CAF.
Basically, anybody who is looking for a piece of equipment or training expenses or travel expenses to participate in any Paralympic sport, right? And it doesn't mean to participate at a Paralympic level, but if they're a wheelchair basketball person, if they're in the wheelchair tennis, we buy, even though we're known for triathlon and cycling, we buy a heck of a lot more wheelchair rugby chairs, wheelchair basketball, wheelchair tennis, travel expenses for kayaking, all that type of stuff. The cool thing about being in Rio at the Paralympics is I had parents come up to me to say that we had gotten their son or daughter a leg or a chair 8 years ago when they were 8 years old, and now they're 16 at their first Paralympics. And we sometimes forget, because we're immersed here at the radio station in terms of sport, we forget sometimes the importance of sport, how sport does alter our impressions of ourselves. So if you're an athlete, like here's a perfect example. A gal named Jamie Whitmore was a top Xterra athlete. Xterra is swim, mountain bike, run, right? They have their championship on Maui. It's $20,000 for the winner. It's sort of a subset of regular triathlon. And there's world championships and all the rest of it. And she won 37 titles in her career. Won the world championship, right? Well, all of a sudden she's got a pain in the back of her leg, and the doctor's, well, you must have a low pain threshold. Well, if you've ever ridden a mountain bike straight uphill, you know she doesn't have a low pain threshold.
Right.
So what they realized, there was a tumor wrapped around her sciatic nerve. Eventually, they had to sever a tendon in her leg so she could never run again. So I called her husband while she was in the hospital and said, Courtney, I know Jamie. She's going to need something. There's this thing called Paralympics. She can't run anymore, but she certainly could swim and she certainly can ride a bike. Well, 2 weeks ago, she took a gold and she took a silver at the Paralympics less than 4 years after this diagnosis. So think about how, and that's an able-bodied person who something traumatic happened to them, and she never would have gone to the Olympics as an able-bodied athlete. No, that wasn't going to happen. She went to the Paralympics as a challenged athlete. So sometimes when trauma happens, I always say when one door closes, sometimes another one opens up. And we see that with our troops all the time. We have a number of the troops who've lost limbs in Iraq and Afghanistan or been paralyzed. They were there in Rio winning medals. And again, overcoming the demons through training and racing that they're dealing with, the depression, all that type of stuff. That goes away when you've got people cheering for you in a stadium with 50,000 people.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I'm like sitting here almost getting emotional just hearing that story. Again, every story I hear, it touches a string on your heart that maybe you don't hear, you don't feel very often.
Right.
Especially if you come to a radio station to hear sports, if you're listening to a podcast to hear about sports, you just don't hear stories like this. You don't hear. I have given up on ranking the stories that I've heard from the Challenged Athletes Foundation because, I heard one and I just knew, I was like, I don't want to prioritize any other stories, but Scout Bassett's story in particular, absolutely. I mean, I'm fighting back tears when I'm talking to her. and she's just sharing her story. She's the sweetest little girl, happy, smiling, and she's happy to share her story. And everybody around, everybody listening, is just getting so emotional. And that's not something you get. You don't get that emotion when you're talking about the Chargers and how they played on Sunday or how the Padres season went. But you get that with all the athletes that you interact with.
Well, and what's fascinating, I was just talking to Scout the other day. So and for our audience, a quick recap. So Scout was born in Nanjing, China, and her leg was burned off in a chemical fire before she was a year old. Her parents had abandoned her in an orphanage, and she was in this orphanage for the first 7 years of her life. They were never allowed outside. They were basically slaves to the people who ran the orphanage. And at the age of 7, she was adopted by a family from Michigan and weighed 22 pounds, totally malnourished. Comes to the States, didn't speak a word of English, within a year and a half winning spelling bees in English. Full ride academic scholarship to UCLA. I did a fun photo shoot with her, with Bill Walton.
That's an amazing
6'11".
picture.
Isn't that a great photo? Yeah. That was
how tall is Scout?
4'8", maybe. 4'8", and about 84 pounds. So then Scout went back to Beijing, went back to China as a triathlete. She participated in the World Championships in what they call paratriathlon. Then, a couple years ago, got in the track and field, and now is the American record holder at 100, 200, and 400 meters. Plus, she was just in the Paralympics in Rio in the 100 and in the long jump. And more importantly, and this is a great message, she's a single above-knee amputee. Her role model was Sarah Reinertsen, who's also single above-knee amputee, who didn't just teach Scout about being an athlete. She helped her with how do you date? What do you do? How do you take care of your prosthetic leg? How do you deal with life, right, as a single above-knee amputee from someone who's already done it? That was really, really important. Then the other thing is both Sarah and Scout are sponsored by Nike, multiple-year contracts with Nike. For this Paralympics, Scout was sponsored by Citibank. They ran numerous commercials, which you saw, showcasing Scout. And right now, she's at the White House with all the Olympians and Paralympics. They're at the White House today. And I think in the next day or two, she's leaving to China through Nike. Nike China wants Scout to come to China, and they have a documentary film crew shooting where Scout was abandoned, going back to the orphanage, and basically reliving those early years of her life so that they have that for posterity. And that story resonates. If you watch Scout doing a TED Talk, you realize how quickly a lot of our athletes grow up. They're sort of, because they're in the spotlight, because they're in the public eye, a lot of times our athletes they grow up and mature way earlier than able-bodied kids, right? And Scout has had to do that. And she is amazing and a wonderful spokesperson, not just for CAF, but for Citibank and for Nike.
Absolutely. And I just want to put this podcast on pause real quick. And I want to remind the listeners, Scout Babbitt is her name. You really, if you're still with us at this point, you're somewhat fascinated in what we're talking about. I would assume you just Google her name, learn a little bit about her, find some interviews that she's done where she tells her story. It's an incredible story. But the one thing that she has in common with all the athletes that I've talked to is that they all say, if given the chance, they wouldn't take their accident back. They wouldn't go back to how it was before they got in that car accident or before they stepped on a landmine in Iraq or anything like that. They have completely, and maybe that kind of comes back to like when we were talking about the Ironman, the mental strength it takes to get over something as traumatic as that and become an athlete at that type of level. They're so mentally strong. They have completely accepted it and become who they are, and they would not take that back.
Yeah, a lot of times our athletes realize, like we said, that chapter is closed. So I can wallow in it. I can spiral into depression. Or I can choose another path and go, hey, this is a pretty cool opportunity to reinvent myself. Now, nobody's saying that they wanted this to happen. But if it did happen, can I make the best of it? Can I end up going to the Paralympic Games like our friend Elena Nichols? Can I end up being a world-renowned athlete like Blake Leeper or Scout Babbitt or Rudy Garcia Tolson? Can I change the fate of my family like Rudy did? He was been making $40,000, $50,000 since the age of 10, bought the family home. So sometimes what looks like a tragedy has a silver lining. I remember Cody McCaslin's a double above knee amputee like Rudy from Texas. And his mom told me once that some mom came up to her and said, I feel so sorry for you that your poor little boy is missing his legs. She goes, well, my poor little boy has been to 6 foreign countries. He speaks in front of up to 1,000 people for corporations, and he's pretty darn happy with his life.
Absolutely. Gosh, her name is erased from my memory.
Yes.
I cannot remember.
Okay.
We had her on our show at the Mighty 1090 here in San Diego. And she, I want to say she
Kayaker?
had, no,
Oh, okay.
It wasn't Elena. We had, she had, I want to say multiple sclerosis, and
Quinn?
not Quinn.
Okay.
Anyway, either way,
Yes.
she said that was the best thing that's ever happened to her.
Really?
That getting that muscular disease was the best thing that's ever happened to her in her life. Given what she's been able to accomplish
since then, yeah.
And hearing that, it really just changed my outlook on more than just sports.
It used to be, and I've interviewed a lot of older characters who lost limbs when they were younger. Back in the day, if you're in your 40s or 50s, if you lost a limb, you covered it up, right? Mm-hmm. Your friends didn't even know you were an amputee. If you moved to a new city, you weren't proud of that. That was something you were embarrassed about.
Well, even Scout, I remember her saying she used a tennis racket as a leg.
Right.
She duct taped a old tennis racket to her knee, and that was her leg.
Yeah. But what happens is now, actually, really, really interesting story. So we were doing our $1 Million Challenge bike ride, and it finishes out at La Jolla Shores. And I had Chris McCormick, 2-time Ironman champion. He did the ride. The year before, he did the triathlon. And after doing the triathlon, I said, I need to bring my girls here, his daughters, to see this. So his daughters were there, and Chris was doing a bike ride, and Chris's wife was with the girls. And all of our kids are at La Jolla Shores to welcome the cyclists, the $1 Million Challenge cyclists coming in. And we've got all these little hurdles set up, and the kids are all playing, and there's legs laying around and chairs. So Chris McCormick's wife says to her daughter, honey, why don't you go play with the other kids? And she goes, well, I can't play with them. I don't have a magic leg like they do. So it was almost like a positive that here's this kid with a Spider-Man painted leg. Here's, I've got a superhero leg. And rather than it being a negative, more along the lines of this is who I am. This is what separates me from everybody else. This is what makes me different in a positive way.
Bob, just a couple more things. I don't want to take too much of your time. You've already been very gracious with your time here on this podcast with me. Starting a company like CAF, I have a little bit of, and you guys are not a nonprofit.
We are. Oh, yeah.
You are a nonprofit. Okay.
Yeah, 501(c)(3).
So I work with a nonprofit as well, my day job, I call it. So I got a little bit of experience of the struggles of working with and especially starting it up. I did not start the company that I work with or anything like that. I just have my own little branch here in La Mesa, California. But what was the hardest part of starting the Challenge Athletes Foundation for you guys?
I think everything evolved fairly quickly. We the three of us, Rick Kozlowski was a race director, put on all the events in San Diego and triathlon for a long time. Jeffrey worked at the Reebok Tinley Company and was really the CFO over there, so he understood the financial side, and I was more the marketing guy. So the three of us had our roles, and for a couple of years, then Virginia Tinley came on as our CEO, but it grew organically. So it's not like we had we're trying to do this or trying to do that. We thought of it as a business. We thought of it as we want to raise money, put money in an endowment, so we have that for rainy day. We want to be incredibly fiscally responsible, and we want to make sure we're buying people the equipment they need. So our mission was always very simple: equipment, training, and travel. And then from there, everything just sort of evolved. And all of a sudden, Robin Williams started coming to our event, and then Oprah narrated our film, Emmanuel's Gift. And before you know it, we're in the at the Oval Office with President Bush talking with one of our athletes. And things have just and then Jim Carrey, Will Ferrell, David James Elliott from JAG, and all these type of athletes, along with Robin Williams, helped to up the ante in terms of the awareness of CAF. And over time, like I said, we've raised over $75 million because people have embraced the cause, because they know we do it from the heart and they know that we do the right things.
You said Robin Williams. I just need to reiterate, yes, the late actor, the comedian, Robin Williams. He was really involved with you guys, wasn't he? I mean, from everything that I've heard, and I know I have friends, people close to me that's, he's acting. It just didn't do anything for. I couldn't get over Morgan Mindy or anything like that. But I found him to be absolutely hilarious, and he had a real gift for sharing that humor. And is that what he brought to CAF?
Absolutely.
To just liven up the spirits a little bit?
Well, he loved our athletes. He and Rudy were teammates on Team Braveheart for 11 years. Rudy used to carry a little business card when he was 7 or 8 years old that said, "A brave heart is a powerful weapon." So the team was Rudy doing the 1.2-mile swims, Robin Williams, who was a very serious cyclist, doing the 56-mile bike ride, and Scott Tinley doing the 13.1-mile run. That was Team Braveheart. And Robin loved Rudy. In fact, it was funny because Robin said, "Listen, Rudy doesn't give a crap that I won an Academy Award. I'm his video game pimp. I get him all the cool new video games. That's why he hangs out with me. Otherwise, he wouldn't have anything to do with me." Robin loved what he loved more than anything was hanging out with our athletes, with the CAF athletes. He loved hanging out with our military or Operation Rebound athletes. He loved hanging out with the pro athletes who supported us, Greg Welch and Scott Tinley. And he the more than anything, when he was riding his bike along the coast during our event, he could be incognito. He's just another geek in a helmet, right?
Yeah, sure.
And when he was at the park, when he was at La Jolla at the Cove, all of our folks would walk up to him and just thank him for being there, shake his hand, every once in a while a photo, but no of the autograph. They were just thanked him for being part of it.
Sure.
And just a wonderful soul who loved the foundation. And it's one of those things when we went to, after Robin passed, Rudy and I were asked to go to Fox affiliate here to talk about Robin, and the host said, "Rudy, did you have a sense of what Robin was going through?" And Rudy, this is when he was 25, very perceptive. He goes, "You can see what I'm dealing with, right? You see I'm a double above knee amputee. You can see my legs." We had no clue what Robin was dealing with, and you couldn't see his angst. And that was pretty insightful from a 25-year-old kid. And I think that's the case. We didn't know what Robin was going through because when he was with us, man, he was just very, very special and very supportive.
Bob, maybe you just answered it there, talking about Robin Williams, but I want to my last question for you, my last bit here, show off a little bit, all right? Name drop, whatever you want to do. What's the best experience you've had through just CAF and all of the experiences that you've had? Was it working, not like a fanboy thing, but working with somebody like you said, Magic Johnson, Wayne Gretzky, of course, Robin Williams, President Bush? Was it an athlete that you helped out, like Emmanuel, his DVD that I've seen that you gave me a copy of? Unbelievable story. What's maybe the highlight of everything that you've been a part of?
Well, probably for me, one of the highlights was just Emmanuel, because that story evolved from nothing. He was a kid who was, born with a deformed leg, and in his country of Ghana, when you have any type of birth defect, you're considered a second-class citizen. So his father abandoned the family, and Mom would carry him back and forth to school every day because no disabled children were in school. Right. She was told to abandon him, and so she didn't. She carried him and loved him. At the age of 13, his mom became ill, so he started shining shoes for a couple of dollars a day. And then when he turned 18, she passed away. And all he wanted to do was he wanted to ride a bicycle across his country to prove that someone with a disability could do anything to honor his mom. And he reached out to us through a missionary, and just show you how sometimes stars align, he sends this typewritten grant request into us, and on it, his birth date is Cinco de Mayo, May 5th, which is my birthday. And so we decided to send him a bike, even though we figured we'd never hear from him again. And that's where, when people say they can't do anything, how do I change the world? I'm just one person. My vote doesn't mean anything. Nothing I do is going to impact the world. Well, here's a kid making $2 a day, shining shoes, riding a bike with one leg across his country, riding 600 kilometers across Ghana, to prove that someone with a disability could accomplish anything. And he did. And then the story becomes, we decide to bring him to San Diego. He's never been out of Ghana. He's never been on a plane. He's got $2 in his pocket when he gets here, and he rides our 56-mile bike ride up Torrey Pines Hill at the end with one leg on a mountain bike. Takes him 7 hours. And from there, it becomes this, well, what do we do next with this young man? I wonder if he's a candidate for prosthetic. Take him to Loma Linda Hospital. They say he is. We do a deal. Loma Linda's going to take care of the hospital. They're going to take care of the operation, and they're going to take care of a home stay. We're going to take care of the travel and cost of a leg. So next thing you know, we're bringing him back here to have this operation at Loma Linda. And a friend of mine named Lisa Lax, her and her twin sister, had just started a film company called Lookalike Productions. And I told her, I said, Lisa, I don't know what this is. It's a 5-minute piece, a 10-minute piece. I don't know if this is a documentary or not. They funded it on their own and followed this young man, basically, because I told them it might be a cool thing. And next thing you know, he does a triathlon after getting his leg. And 6 weeks after getting his leg, he does a triathlon. After doing a triathlon, he goes back to Ghana, and it's like a ticker-tape parade. He's got this $15,000 leg on in a country with a per capita income of $400. We bring him back to do our ride the following year. He does it in 4 hours rather than 7 hours, with 2 legs rather than 1. We send him up to Nike, where he receives the Casey Martin Award for people who are motivational to the disabled. And with it comes a $25,000 grant, which we match. So now he's an ambassador to Ghana with $50,000. Then we send him to New York to have a sit-down with the Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, to talk about the rights of the disabled in Ghana. Then we send him to the premiere of the film at the National Geographic Theater in D.C. And the night before the film, the week before, he receives the Arthur Ashe Courage Award with Jim McLaren, who we started the foundation for. And then we're invited to the White House, and we're in the Oval Office with President Bush, and President Bush comes walking in, and it was the day of the bombings in London, so we thought the whole thing would be canceled. Next thing you know, it's myself, it's Emmanuel, my partner at Competitor Magazine, and President Bush. And from the meeting with President Bush, there was a photo in the paper the next day in Ghana, and Emmanuel had been not getting a lot of love from the president of Ghana about what he was looking to do, right, which was to get a disability act passed in his country. Well, now the most powerful man in the world is in a photo with Emmanuel in the papers in Ghana. So when Emmanuel got back to Ghana, the president met him at the airport and said, Emmanuel, I'm going to get your bill presented to Parliament, and 6 months later it was passed. And that, to me, was watching the premiere of the film, from a selfish perspective in Chicago, knowing that, my 86-year-old dad was there to watch this film and could see that, his son had some input in changing this young man's life. Mm-hmm. That was cool. And the fact that the film traveled around the country and we won awards at South by Southwest Film Festival and all these other film festivals, to me, that's the most impactful story we've done because, Emmanuel had a little girl who he named Linda after Loma Linda Hospital, had another girl who he named after his mom, named her Comfort. And Emmanuel proved, just like CF does every day, that you can change lives. Everybody out there, you can change lives for the better just by believing that you can. Emmanuel had no formula. He was a poor kid, and next thing you know, he's in the Oval Office with the President of the United States, a kid who was shining shoes for $2 a day. So to me, that's the American dream, and I think that's the type of stuff that CAF can do, and we do it every day.
Bob, hey, I really appreciate it. Before I say goodbye, Emmanuel's Gift, the documentary.
Check it out.
Scout Babbitt. Look her up. Challenged Athletes Foundation. Is it CAF.org?
ChallengedAthletes.org.
ChallengedAthletes.org. Anything else that my listeners need to know about what you do and how they can maybe get involved or keep up to date and follow along?
Just if they go to challengeathletes.org, they can donate there. They can check out volunteer opportunities and read all about what we do. They can check out on our video pages. You can check out our YouTube pages. You can watch a Scout Babbitt video. You can watch pieces on Emmanuel. And they can also check out Babbittville.com and check out our radio stuff there. And subscribe to my newsletter. Watch Breakfast with Bob from Kona, which starts on October 3rd, and we do 60 interviews leading in the race day. So it's great stuff. And thank you so much for everything you and Kevin Acey have done to support our athletes.
Anytime. Again, it's not what we can do for them. It's what they can do for us and what you guys can do for us. Bob, I really, really appreciate the time. I told you I had so much to talk about and we might go long. So I really appreciate you hopping on and just telling me a little bit about yourself and the company. And I think my listeners really appreciated it as well. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, Paul. Thank you.
All right, wow. Incredible stuff from Bob Babbitt on Twitter at Bob_Babbitt. You can listen to his radio show. It's here in San Diego based on the Mighty 1090 Babbittville Radio on Sundays from 8 to 10. You can go to his website and get it there. Check out the Challenged Athletes Foundation. I really, really couldn't suggest that anymore to you. It's an amazing foundation that helps so many people just regain strength to go on and achieve their goals and chase their dreams. Like Scout Bassett, her story, I get emotional just thinking about it. Emmanuel's Gift, great documentary. If you are a guy, if you're somebody like me and you appreciate documentaries, please watch Emmanuel's Gift. It will change you as a person. So I really am thankful that I got to sit down there with Bob Babbitt. That's going to do it for the Rinder Report this week. We have gone over our time limit, as we sometimes tend to do. And by we, I mean me. There's only one reason why anything goes good or bad around here, and that is my fault. So apologies. Follow me on Twitter at @ThePolarBearSD. Again, you can go on iTunes now. We are on iTunes. I got to freaking stop saying we. The Rinder Report, my podcast, I'm on iTunes now, so you can head over there. You can subscribe and get them right to your phone pretty much instantaneously. As soon as I press post, just a couple minutes later, it's on iTunes and it's on your phone. And all the interviews and podcasts, they're all up on my blog as well, therinderreport.blogspot.com. That's going to do it for me. Week 4 of the NFL starts on Thursday Night Football, and we will talk to you next week. Thank you very much for listening in.